you just who to hate. From the teachers in our classroom to the leaders of our state, I'm registered to vote. This pleasant land's free, so I took the intercity for democracy and me. I knocked at the door, but they didn't let me in, so I kicked it down and I walked right.
Hello and welcome to Leo Say's Pantheon, a fortnightly podcast with me, your host, Leo Say's. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today I'm in conversation with Brenton Clutterbuck, the author of upcoming book Chasing Eris, which he describes as a snapshot of his experiences of contemporary Discordianism. The book is hopefully due out this month, April 2018, and further information can be found in the description box below. Brenton, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Doing very well, thank you.
So thank you for agreeing to do this.
No, it's a buzz. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, cool.
That's good.
Well, and I appreciate you sending me the draft to your book as well. I've not had a chance to properly look through it, but obviously I've had a skim and it looks great.
It's no worries. It's basically War and Peace. It's absolutely massive. I'm aware. So.
Did you enjoy writing it?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I say that now. You know, it's it gets to that stage. You know, when you're getting towards the end of it, it's more like you hate it, and I think it's a bit of a thing they say, like, you know that you're moving towards the end of the book when you hate it and you wish you never started it, and it's horrible and everything sucks. So now that I'm actually finished it, yes, I enjoyed writing it, but there's certainly points where I've been like, why did I start this? This is ridiculous.
It sounds like it's been a really long process. Is it like 4 years you've been putting it together?
Yeah, 5. I did the trip in 2013, so so it's been pretty full on.
Well, okay, so I've got a few questions written down. So obviously, just for anyone who's listening to this, you're writing a book called Chasing Eris, isn't it?
That's it, it's Chasing Eris, yep.
Yeah, and it's a history of Discordianism?
Yeah, I sort of describe it as a bit of a snapshot of Discordianism. So it does dig into elements of the history. It does sort of, do a quick 101 of, well, I guess some of, the greatest hits. So we do a quick 101 of the KLF and, the stories of Robert Anton Wilson, stories of Ken Campbell's great caper with the play performance of Illuminatus, and so we do touch on a lot of those things. But more than anything, it's meant to be really a snapshot of what does Discordia look like right now, and it's an interesting place that it lives in that sense that it is about Discordianism in 2013, which really was before a lot of. At this point in time when there was a lot of this energy that has since bobbled over,
It really has, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, as you know, I believe you did some of the Cosmic Trigger artwork, or you contributed to some of those things, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was a small bit, but they were doing like trading cards right back when Daisy Campbell was putting together the Cosmic Trigger play. And I actually went down to Shoreditch when they did it was before the play was properly put together, but they were sort of gathering people. It was like a Find the Others event. And I went down there on my own, and I was like completely sort of social anxiety. And I thought, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So I was like just hanging around feeling like a right weirdo, but you're in a room full of weirdos, so it's fine. But yeah,
absolutely.
Good. But it really has since then. That was 2013, and it's... like you say, I think that John Higgs writes an introduction to the book you've written, hasn't he? And he was saying, like, before that point, it was really like, who else is actually out there that's into this stuff? And in the past 4-5 years, it turns out that there's a whole culture of it now.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And actually, one of the places that I went is, while I was in Bristol, I found out about the Horse Hospital event, which was where John Higgs and Daisy Eris Campbell basically got together and said, by the way, here's this thing that we're at this stage about to do. Mm-hmm. Hadn't even got into it yet.
Yeah.
So I got to sort of be there to see that starting point of a lot of that. So it really was, right on on the cusp of that. That's also where, and I don't remember. I know that he goes by John 100. Jonathan Harris, I think it is. That's where he sort of did the money burn, the first sort of public money burn that he ever did. And of course, he's now running like a magazine for money burners. And there's a lot of really just wild stuff that has grown out from there. So in retrospect, I kind of worried a lot. I've sort of been like, it's at some points I was going, I have to get it out now because it's been 5 years and it's all moved on. I've sort of failed to capture that moment, but in some ways, I feel good about what it is, which is it's the photograph of. In some ways, it feels like the photograph of the giant just before it woke up, and who knows how much weirder it's going to get from here.
Well, that's it. I mean, it could have felt like, is this just a temporary thing, and will it just disperse again? But I mean, you're obviously writing about Discordianism as a whole, but definitely for Robert Anton Wilson. John Higgs wrote, he was fearing that he would just be lost to history and no one would really know who he was. But that definitely seems like not the case anymore. He will be remembered.
Yeah, this sort of extraordinary various elements around Robert Anton Wilson that have really just sunk hooks into things. It's his family getting the copyright back and seeing that all come out in the form of Hilarities Press.
Yeah.
Seeing him played on the stage through Cosmic Trigger.
Yeah.
And then everything that surrounds that as well. It's been quite extraordinary to just to think about that. To think about 5 years ago there was this very very real sense that this could be the time, and this is what, of course, John Higgs' Horse Hospital speech was about. This could be the time that we really see it disappear, and I think that's just turned out to be extraordinarily not the case. We've had a lot of older documents have been found. A lot of extraordinary works have been found. I think especially Adam Gorightly's Discordian archives and what's coming out of there, the Historia Discordia document, and all of that kind of side of things as well. So there's all these different points: the creative, his original works, these unknown sort of older artifacts, and kind of all blooming at the same time. In some ways independent of each other, and to me that's the most exciting thing to see is these very chaotic, unrelated sprouts kind of mutating and growing in all these different directions, but still cross-pollinating and infecting each other.
Yeah, it well and truly feels alive, and I think it's fascinating how it's happened, and quite rapidly as well. I was actually wondering if we could talk a little bit about that Adam Gorightly book, because I've got it, the Historia Discordia. What differentiates your book to that, for example?
It was actually really a huge shaper of what I was doing that I found out about. So at the time, because I rang Adam Gorightly very early on in the piece over Skype, and we had some interesting conversations, and I think at that stage I kind of knew that he had a few projects on the go. I knew that there was the existence of these documents and so on, and that there were new projects going to come from that. And it was good for me because it was at a point when I was still developing a sense of, well, what is this going to be? What sort of story is this going to be? And it was incredibly valuable for me to know that, actually there are people who are, much, more substantially well versed on the early Discordian scene and what went on and so on. And there are people who are telling those stories and who have told those stories in really quite detailed ways. And it sort of told me, okay, well that this is kind of a hint to lean more towards this portrait of contemporary Discordianism. Yeah. Because I've just snuck out and got the copy of it that I have, and it's extraordinary. Like, it's huge. Like, physically, it's huge, and it's just this gorgeous treasure trove of all sorts of original stuff. And it's one of those gorgeous things that is gets to be both super, authentically super entertaining, but also, I guess, historically important in some ways. If you, it's just historically important to the whole thing. And it's funny because I think Hill had a stamp, like he used to put a stamp on things, like please keep this. This may be an important historical document.
Right.
And it's kind of taking the piss, but in some ways it's kind of ended up to being true, because there is I think a historical validity in really exploring the way in which all of this has come about, and just putting that material together. But I'd say that's probably the main. That's the difference formed itself by me knowing, okay, all these works are coming out, and then Historia came out, and the new Caught in the Crossfire, the new Kerry one came out, and that sort of told me, okay, well, there are other people doing the history much better than I can, and what I'll need to be doing is something else, and that's got to be something different.
It's more about the present and the future of the movement, potentially.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, absolutely. And I guess, certainly the present, the past present, as it were.
Yeah.
But yeah, and sort of the mentality, the psychology of it, it's like, what is it that has drawn people into essentially, a joke religion? And how is that, why has that captured people in this, fairly extraordinary way? And that's the story that sort of I wanted to tell, was that relationship between Discordia. And I think that something that's worth mentioning too is I wanted to talk about the story of Discordia, almost this portrait of this thing, this concept, this mimetic virus that exists through people. And kind of tell that story through these people, whereas I think certainly a lot of the other historical, the historically based works that have been written are focused on particular people and telling their stories. And I don't know if maybe that's just the mentality that I went into it with, and I don't know if that's a difference in approach as well.
Well, it's certainly something that's apparent for me, sort of flicking through your work so far, is that you've clearly gone around and there's a lot of interviews in it. You've had conversations with people, and that's really exciting because people are talking about it at the moment, and it's more of a qualitative experience as opposed to a quantitative experience, I suppose, to use academic terms. Yeah,
there was a lot of interviews, and a lot of interviews that ended up being reduced to, these fantastic interviews reduced to a line or a paragraph, or it did not make it at all, simply because, if I included everything, it would, it would be just stupidly big and unwieldy, and nobody would ever bother opening it. And,
it's already
it
3,500 words, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty huge. I'm holding my breath because I've ordered a proof copy from Lulu, who at the moment I plan to generate them through.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of holding my breath to see, I'm not good at sort of visualizing in that way. So I'm sort of looking forward to, for the first time, actually seeing how big it is, and hopefully it's not too stupidly big that I have to start asking myself questions about, how do I change my approach here?
I imagine that will be a beautiful moment, though, after sort of 5 years of working on it, to actually hold the product in a way. This is it. This is your baby. Even if you hate the baby. No.
Well, no, I think, that's probably not a bad metaphor, is it? Because nobody says they're having a lot of fun while they're, push.
No,
but,
exactly.
Once it's down,
yeah.
you're like, it was worth it.
Yeah.
But still waiting for the baby to come through the post.
That's it. I like how you said that it's almost like Discordianism operates in like sort of memes entering into culture. Things like I wrote an article recently for a Discordian zine, and it was sort of looking at the links between the Sega Mega Drive, and particularly Sonic the Hedgehog. And I was sort of seeing these links to Discordianism within the games, and I was thinking, am I just fucking mad? Am I making this up? Or am I seeing that the producers of this game were inspired in some way, whether consciously or not, by these sort of ripples in the culture from Discordianism and sort of the counterculture in general?
Yeah, that's interesting, and that does sound like I guess a lot of things that a lot of ripples that do go through Discordia, and things like, certainly the idea of Starbucks Pebbles as an illustration of, okay, well, we impose patterns on things, and we look for patterns because that's a human tendency. It's an evolutionary tendency. If you sort of go, okay, well, here's a pattern. Sometimes people go into the left part of the field, and that's also when people die from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. So maybe we should not do that. But then you also, we've still got that. So you end up going, oh, okay, well, I see Sonic the Hedgehog is wearing a red bandana, and I also remember Tupac wore a red bandana. So and we end up doing that, and I guess this is where it ties into these concepts of magic and so on, because I think you can say that there is a hidden world, this world of things that kind of happen through intuition, through conscious and unconscious patterns, through things that inspire each other in again, these chaotic and these unpredictable ways. And I think that one of the things that Discordia does is gives you a language for that, and gives you a way of thinking about that doesn't go in the direction of this is somehow centrally planned or intended either by God or the Illuminati or whatever, and lets you kind of laugh about it instead of just becoming deeply and profoundly paranoid and terrified.
Well, it's basically a decentralization philosophy in a way, isn't it? I mean, it has its links to the conspiracy theory culture, and I want to come into that in a moment. But you're right, sort of from a magical worldview, whether or not literally Sonic the Hedgehog has got anything to do with Discordia, from a magical point of view, if Eris as a spirit being evoked as part of the culture will ripple out into the collective unconscious, and maybe it does have an impact on it. Like you say, it appears as memes throughout, and okay, literally it's not connected, but who's to say that from a magical perspective that she's not everywhere?
Yeah, it's. I did a creative writing course at one point, and that was something interesting that I remember being told was you just get these periods in writing where suddenly, the big thing is pirates now. So everybody's making movies about pirates and books about pirates. It's not that they've talked to each other or are ripping each other off necessarily. It's for whatever reason that's kind of seeped into the cultural imagination. It's just become the moment for that thought, and why that is, whether people are kind of all looking at this, whether it's the political context or the social context, or the where the pop culture is at, or that everybody of a certain age wanted to be a pirate, and now they're all at the age where they've got the money to make movies. These things happen, and they're connected in ways that are indirect and intangible, and that's a bit of a weird thing to get your head around as an ostensibly logical, rational creature.
I actually wanted to pick up a bit about how things have changed over the past 5 years, and obviously the whole cosmic trigger play and John Higgs' work and your work and Adam Gorightly's work. There's a lot going on. But also, I read an article on Disinfo this fairly recently, and I think it's Thad McCracken, he's the editor there now. And he wrote this article about the alt-right almost using Robert Anton Wilson as one of their heroes now. And I just found that really interesting, because obviously Robert Anton Wilson, if you listen to a lot of his lectures, there was a time when he was quite outspoken libertarian, and I think that the whole libertarian movement has had a crossover into sort of the far right movement in America. So it's just interesting how sort of people will see these figures through a very different lens.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if you want to, if this is something that you'd like to argue about for every day of your life forever, you can join some of the Robert Anton Wilson focused groups on Facebook and have that exact conversation every single day. You know, there's certainly a lot of this sort of bizarre tendency to try to claim Robert Anton Wilson in particular for all of these things, and I think that there's a lot you can say to that. And one of them is you know, I think that it is difficult to be. I can't see how you can be, you know, even simply familiar with Robert Anton Wilson and think that, you know, this sort of explicitly aggressively racist nationalist ideology would, you know, be in line with his form of thinking. Also, a few other things like that. People trying to characterize Robert Anton Wilson and his strain of libertarianism and his opposition to certain trends within feminism, and talk about that as though these are comments or these are ideas or these are things that he's coming out with. You know, yesterday that he just, you know, put up a Medium article that, you know, was, you know, this passage from Cosmic Trigger or whatever came from a Medium article put up on the internet yesterday. And you cannot apply the politics of somebody at a totally different place and time.
It's completely out of context.
As though, yeah, the context has shifted, and Robert Anton Wilson as a shifting person, you know, through his whole life as an intellectually evolving person, you know, himself would have a million different takes on different things now. You know, I think that it sort of does a disservice to sort of say, oh, well, today Bob would be this or he would be that. You know, I think he'd be very complex as he always was. And
sure.
And the last thing I sort of think on that is, like, in some ways it's kind of like, who cares? It's, you know, this whole, you know, I know Bob was a lot of things beyond being a Discordian, but part of this whole Discordian idea is, you know, you are a pope, you get to make the rules, you know, kill your idols. It's like, well, you know, what if Bob was a member of the alt-right? You know, as appallingly stupid as an idea as that is, like, if he was, who cares? It doesn't mean it makes any sense. Like, you can use your own thought, and this idea that we have to determine, oh, okay, you know, Bob would have been this team or Bob would have been that team. Like, surely we can just come to our own conclusions on those things.
It's like you say, if you have insight into the what he was talking about, sort of in terms of belief and reality tunnels, and even the whole Discordian movement, is that we don't have central idols. We don't have these figures that are hierarchically above us, and we almost obey and place them into categories in this sense. That's not what this is about.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's this gorgeous, you know, I think with Saint May and sort of that little cluster of Discordians, Saint May used to host CallistiCon, and they'd upset people all the time, you know, because they had this big event about bringing people together, and yeah, people would quote, you know, like you're quoting scripture. It's like, oh, but the Principia says that Discordians should stick apart, you know, like it's like, you know, like it's a scriptural rule, you know, like you're doing the wrong thing by, you know, it's bizarre, and I think that there's, you know, it's interesting that there's layers to this sort of thought, and I think that, you know, on the other side, you know, it's. I can't. I want to equate it to some Zen saying, but I can't think of which one it is. But basically, you know, I think that there's the steps. You know, first of all, you're not a Discordian, and then you become a Discordian, and then you're not a Discordian anymore. Because I think if you sort of appreciate it for what it is, it's being and not being a Discordian are kind of the same thing in some sense.
Well, it's like those old Zen koans, I imagine, you know, how many of them are there, which is basically the same narrative where, you know, the the trainee goes up to his master and he says, I've got it, I've finally got it, and he says what he thinks it is, and then he gets hit over the head with a stick, because if you're saying you've got it, you haven't got it. It's a similar thing, isn't it? The minute that you become a Discordian, you're not a Discordian, but the minute you're not a Discordian, you're a pope. So
yeah, I mean, it's and that's I mean, that's one of my favourite sayings is the Burroughs one of language is a virus from outer space. It's all of this language about if you are or aren't or will be or could be a Discordian or a pope or a whatever. It's all this sort of broad philosophical idea that is kind of in this place to me that's a little bit beyond language. It's anything you say about it is going to be wrong in some way, because it's all an approximation of these lived realities.
Sure. At the beginning you said that Discordianism is like a joke religion, and it is, but in a way it's profoundly mystical as well. I actually think that Discordianism aligns itself to Taoism. There's a lot of correlation between the two, really.
Yeah, and that's not coincidental. This was a trend in the US at the time, that this kind of Eastern philosophy was starting to be processed in ways that were palatable to a Western audience, and in particular to a North American audience. And certainly, I think that there's more than a handful of very conscious kind of references to the Tao and to these sorts of ideas, and that's why we have things like one of my favourite projects came out of the PED cabal, which was the Tao Te Ching, this Discordian rewriting of the Tao Te Ching, and it's not awkward at all. It lends itself very easily to this kind of being processed in this different way, and I think that the reason is because at its heart, one of the things that Discordianism is a kind of this culturally appropriate processing of Eastern ideas.
Yeah.
And so it's not a stretch at all to say, okay, well, could we make the Tao Te Ching funny? Well, yeah, absolutely, and Discordia, of course, is a perfect vehicle for that, because in some ways that's what's happening already.
Well, do you think, you said like culturally appropriate, and that's really interesting actually, because there's the idea that the whole New Age movement since the 60s and even sort of moving today, like the whole interest in yoga and spirituality, it could be considered from a perspective almost like a racist cultural appropriation. But Discordianism almost feels like, okay, it took certain concepts, or they're not even concepts, they're underpinnings in a way, and yes, it's an appropriation, but it made something of its own that was appropriate to, like you say, a North American Western audience.
Yeah, and it's that I guess I have these days a complicated relationship with the PD cabal, but when I was more involved there, I remember that there was quite a bit of discussion about explicitly about cultural appropriation. It became a bit of a topic at one point, and that was sort of an interesting moment for me to think about it, because it's absolutely true that if you are a Discordian, you certainly you can't make a blanket condemnation of cultural appropriation without running into some problems, because
sure.
Principia Discordia is hugely culturally appropriative. It very explicitly borrows from Eastern thought, from Jainism, from Greek philosophy, or Greek, obviously Greek legends, as far as Eris goes and so on.
Yeah.
And I do come in contact with that, and I think that it's a place where I think the starting point is to allow a degree of nuance in our thought, and to firstly just cut off this little idea that says, cultural appropriation bad, cultural something else good, or people break it into cultural appropriation, cultural appreciation, or whatever, these different ways of creating systems to think about it. And I think that if you just let yourself start by saying, okay, well, maybe this is appropriative or this is problematic in some way, and just becoming comfortable with that possibility at first, it's a funny one. It's a funny one, because I don't think that something being culturally appropriative is necessarily a wholesale condemnation of that thing for even existing.
No.
Yoga and meditation and a lot of these things are practices that branch through a variety of now cultural or religious traditions.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess, that you can't separate the politics from the culture, or politics from culture at all, in any wholesale sort of way. And I do think that people who get very upset about some of these culturally appropriative practices, it's not necessarily so much about, oh, well, you wore a thing from my culture and that makes you bad, so much as it's, people's lived experiences of being treated like shit because they belong to a particular culture, and that is seen as weird and bizarre. And then, 5 years later, after being, sort of very poorly treated due to this, they're seeing, oh, well, the next big thing is this thing from your culture that is now cool because white people have it.
Yeah.
And I think that we can think about those things critically and independently without, sort of falling back on these simplifications that just say, oh, well,
it's racist. Unless
your people made it, then it's not for you. I think that's another sort of trap.
Well, it will be an absolute lie if, like, a lot of people, myself, for example, look back and think about my interest in, historically, and saw things like Helena Blavatsky and Crowley, and they were really quite pinnacle in bringing Eastern thought over to the West in the early 20th century. And, by today's sort of standards, that might be deemed cultural appropriation. But it was helpful, and it did introduce practices and viewpoints and perspectives into the popular culture that have had a ripple effect and been very important actually into the progression and development.
Yeah. There's a lot of different angles, to explore the idea from, and I guess I am aware of my place as discussing my very important thoughts on cultural appropriation as, Mr. Middle-class white male in a Western country. But I guess, dealing with culture is not a replacement for dealing with political realities. It's in the sense that, I guess maybe some of these cultural problems or these cultural consequences have these political dimensions of people being systematically silenced or, problems caused in other ways. And I guess what, the purpose of, understanding this idea of cultural appropriation is not to get to this place where you can say, oh, I am a good person because I am not culturally appropriating, but it's more to say, okay, well, I can understand enough to understand the politics around it, and by understanding my place in that sort of these political systems, also tells me maybe that there's places where, okay, well, if we are going to be building things building things out of systems of thought that originated in different places, or if we're going to be engaged in these kinds of practices, okay, well, in what ways is that maybe a process that has come from a position of privilege or a position of, a position that maybe lacks degrees of authenticity, and how can we deal with that in a way that maybe redresses some of the political realities behind it? How can we elevate these voices that have maybe been politically silenced or challenged, or even I think even just things like taking here's a cool thing I wrote that's this I've decided to mix Thelema and Thelema and Buddhism and Mickey Mouse cartoons, and maybe before you put that on the internet you should have a conversation with a Buddhist, for starters, like just to be informed and be aware. And I think that you need to be at least aware of the space, the political space, the intellectual space, the spiritual space that you're occupying, and maybe start by asking yourself a few questions of, well, how did I get here? Why is my voice being heard here when other voices are not? And how do I engage, recognize those political realities and, maybe act in accordance with that knowledge and not make a dick of myself.
Yeah, it's about willingness to engage, learn and experience then from different aspects of culture,
Yeah, I think that certainly that's a starting place, and I think it's a starting place, and I guess it's I take that as the starting place because again, I'm very aware that I am engaged with things that are ideas that are not necessarily ideas that I guess have come to me via a very direct cultural line, things that have come from other places and other people who, maybe weren't cool enough, weren't considered cool enough to be amplified in the mainstream, but when, a couple of poop jokes were thrown in, it became amplified. And I guess being aware of myself as somebody who doesn't know the answers, who doesn't know all of the political realities, and just having that willingness to as Robert Anton Wilson says, admit that you are a cosmic schmuck, and start by saying, okay, well, all I know is I know nothing, but also take that a step further and say, and politically, my responsibility is to move from that place of not knowing to maybe being a bit more aware and changing my approach as a result.
A striving to be better, basically, but not assuming that you're ever going to reach a place of not being a cosmic schmuck.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Of working to be better and working to, engage with the world as it is, and do that in a way that has a positive impact, and that I think that weirdly enough, if you get into sort of the political side of things and ideas of social justice and so on, one of the most useful concepts, although it's a bit of an appropriation from the original, is this idea of a fnord is, to me, extraordinarily valuable if you sort of want to engage with, I guess, the philosophy behind various social justice movements, because it's a thing that you don't see because it's not there, but it is. And when we talk about different types of prejudice, whether we're talking about racism, sexism, class prejudice, or even things like cultural appropriation, well, what's the thing that you don't see because it's not really there, and yet it has these extraordinary kind of almost like magic consequences that have very real kind of structural results in the way that people live and people interact with each other. And I think that the use of fnord as a cultural tool, or as a I guess this philosophical tool, is really helpful. I think just very quickly, I think I do have to give credit here, because I'm thinking now that possibly Pixie, who I met in Europe, in England, I think.
Right.
I think that was something that she put out there.
Yeah. So she was suggesting that almost, say, for example, certain social privileges are the fnords.
Yeah. I guess in some way, it's like, so something that's interesting is there's a statistic which is something along the lines of, men tend to perceive women as speaking more when they speak in a group situation, when they speak about the same amount as men speak. So, men, feel like women are just talking on and on and on when they're talking about equal to a man's speech. Now and again, this is why I sort of do talk about our existence in a magical universe, in a universe made of, these sorts of magical things, these things that you can't see, because it's like, how do you quantify that? How do you, I guess you do in the social sciences in a way that you can do the statistics, but you can't go through life being, an encyclopedia of every statistic that's, ever been worth understanding. It's a lot more complex than that. And I do think that one of the ways to understand things is to understand things in the sense of, well, there are these magical forces, that make things the way they are, and we can understand these forces through this sort of magical language set that we have access to.
That makes total sense to me. People often talk about magic as like invisible forces, but the invisible almost implies that they're there in the literal world, almost as puppet masters influencing. But what we're talking about is that they're forces that don't exist literally, but the manifestation of which exists. We see the evidence of that in really complex forms in the physical world. I
think that sometimes it's easier to, and we speak in metaphors all the time.
Yes.
It can be easier to, I remember, I think the Russian, I think they called them the maniacs, these guys who committed this series of crimes, and you really had a ringleader and this other guy who was, it just sort of ended up getting deeply caught up in it, and committing, these horrible murders. And I think that you can talk about trauma, and you can talk about, you can talk in all this sort of language and try to explain it in these terms. But I think that if you say, when you get dragged into something that you don't have the sense of how to get out of, it damages your soul. It damages something in your soul, and you can never come back from that. And if you're a person who doesn't believe in a soul, I think you can still understand what that means on an intuitive level, that you don't necessarily have to talk about trauma, and you don't necessarily have to talk about post-traumatic stress and put everything into these sort of scientific, rational terms. I think that we can sometimes access the world better through this language set that is metaphorical, that is symbolic, because we can't connect with the world like computers, like data crunchers. It has to be this other way of engaging with this world that is, on a day-to-day basis, mostly too complex to understand in those reductive terms.
It makes me think about the work that Gordon White is doing at the moment with sort of looking at mythology and how mythology is very important to human beings and human culture. That we use myths, and really what you're saying is a kind of shorthand for the complexity of experience, but it resonates with us on a deeper level where we understand through a certain set of images and language.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and that these sets of language, we have this chicken and egg relationship that the language does influence your thought, but your thought will also influence the language, which is a virus from outer space, as we know. But yeah, I think there was one of the interviews with how Thornley and Wilson first connected together was talking about different forms of matrism, of worship of different sort of religions that had a goddess figure at the head. And I think that there is in some ways, interestingly enough, in the same conversation that we've talked about, this theory that Robert Anton Wilson's views can be used to justify outright ideology, I think there is a strong strand of feminism within Discordian thought, and I don't know if that would be there or if that would manifest in the same way had it not been a religion that was built around a goddess figure. So I think, the stories that we do tell, they have these, certainly these links to our social and our philosophical and our political existence. But of course, those things all have to inform each other. And if at some point that cycle breaks down, of course, we end up with these stories that, then almost exist outside of, I guess, the world that we inhabit on a day-to-day basis. And that's what's exciting about, this increase in Discordian activity and Discordian thought, is that you then have these this political activity, this social activity, this creative activity that is informed by a type of Discordian thought, but not necessarily in terms of a direct, A to B relationship, just in a way that it kind of permeates, these things permeate each other and become part of each other in this kind of synchronistic fashion.
Let's sort of move back towards the book, if that's okay. I'm just aware of time. I want to get through certain things, and I definitely want to talk about the book that you've been writing. So for you, during your research of the book and sort of conducting all the interviews, doing everything that you've been doing towards it over the past 5 years, what has been, or what aspects of it have been the most interesting and insights that perhaps you wasn't aware of before that has come to your attention?
In some ways it's really difficult because it's difficult because I in some ways I'm so familiar with what I've learned along the way that the things that surprised me, I almost don't remember what I was surprised by at the start. I guess the first thing that did surprise me quite seriously is that first community that I was engaged with, that the PED people.
Yeah.
There was very much this sense that Discordianism is it's a metaphor, it's a symbolic, it's essentially atheistic. It's this joke for atheists about religion that also touches on philosophical ideas. And there is definitely, strong crossover with a lot of belief systems, a lot of ways of thinking. And I guess it surprised me at first that there were people who did Discordian ritual with degrees of seriousness, or people who were perhaps Discordians but also pagans who had pagan beliefs, and I mean, this all sounds, I guess, shockingly naive now. It's especially that the profile of a lot of these things has kind of steadily increased. But I do remember in that very early part of research being really quite surprised, quite shocked at the variety of thought that made itself consistent with, I guess, with being a Discordian, and that, it wasn't just a bunch of atheists who were very very amused at themselves. It was really something hugely bigger than that.
I think that's what I was saying earlier about the you sort of described it as a joke religion, but it's not just a joke religion, because there are parallels and there is a lot of resonance with quite profound spiritual beliefs, like you say, paganism, Taoism. There are correlations there that, okay, yeah, it presents itself as a joke, and there is a lot of humour in it, of course, but it's a bit smug to say that it's just an atheist joke on religion. I mean, even if you were an atheist using Discordianism as a bit of a joke for yourself, in a way, if you're subscribing to that, you're kind of fallen for a system.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's just I guess it was largely this assumption of, well, I am in contact with some Discordians, and this is the trend that I see with them, and just making these very incorrect assumptions very early on. This was early on that I was sort of just making these assumptions and being proved just delightfully wrong by the whole thing.
I mean, I certainly don't want to sound like I'm scolding you by any means. I just realise the way that I presented that didn't.
No, but that's fine, and I think if I do sort of talk about it in those terms and present it in those terms, it's, I mean, something that I've tried to do is kind of map my own development of the understanding. So I think that what I have tried to do is use that kind of language, I guess, earlier on, to sort of, I guess, set the reader's expectations where my expectations or where my assumptions were. And then throughout over the course of the novel or of the book, just try to flesh out, the way in which my own vision of what Discordia could be developed.
How did you first get into Discordianism yourself?
I found it on Wikipedia, so it's not an incredibly exciting story. I found it on Wikipedia while I was still at university, and just sort of, I found it on Wikipedia, and it grabbed me, and from there I found that forum, and I really found it not an incredibly long time before I took a teaching job that took me out of the major cities, and I was somewhere that was quite a bit smaller, quite, somewhat more, you didn't have a lot of people around who would sort of engage in these types of, Discordian type conversations. Sure. And so it was a creative outlet for me where I could get on and have these conversations that I couldn't have anywhere else, like come up and say, oh, hey, Myers-Briggs, like, could you use Myers-Briggs to, like, create yourself as separate servitors, like, within a chaos magic system? Like stuff like that, which, and that was on the edge of kind of, I guess, the acceptable discourse of the forum, that was a little bit too, maybe woo kind of stuff. But, certainly there were people there who had that interest, who engaged with me on it. But, I guess that's why I did connect with it so much, was because it was the outlet at a time when I didn't have a lot of other creative outlets, and it became a way to start doing a lot of creative work, having that creative outlet, being involved in projects like Intermittence, which was an open source Discordian magazine, getting involved in other things. It was just a way to engage with that. And at the time that I realised that I wasn't very happy where I was in a lot of ways, I guess, in my life as well as, physically, where I was living, Discordia was kind of at the forefront of my mind at the time. So this idea of taking time off to do a creative thing, at the time, it felt very natural that it should be a creative thing that revolved around Discordianism somehow.
Yeah. It sounds like it was a very personal and important part of your life at the time in particular.
Yeah, I think so. It got me. I think it gave me a language to put a lot of ideas into. And the same as everybody, I think everybody goes through this process, at first you're not a Discordian, then you are, then you aren't. I sort of got into the whole thing of, oh, this is great, if everybody knew about this, if we spread Discordianism, everybody would be open-minded, and, and if you go on to, if you think that you need to spend 5 minutes on one of the Discordian Facebook groups to be relieved of that impression, because oh my gosh, but that was where it was for me.
Social media is a very sobering experience.
I remember unsubscribing from it when I was traveling, because I didn't want to be in a hostel in a public place scrolling through a Facebook and suddenly, like, the world's most racist meme pops up. some pretty rank stuff going on in some of those groups, in groups that do not have sort of good moderation. And I guess it lends itself, this on one level, this ideology about chaos and disorder and embrace the chaos. I guess I can understand how the natural extension of that would be, we don't moderate our Facebook groups. Moderation and censorship is putting limits on the chaos. And but I think that's very much that circuit of thinking where you're like, I am a Discordian. And once you stop being a Discordian with a capital D, maybe you realise that actually having a tolerable experience while you're on the internet actually outranks the ideological purity of never ever moderating anything, because you're a proper Discordian and you're a really real Discordian, and you serve Eris and chaos and all the rest of it.
I mean, I remember when I first got into it, I was about 17, 18, and at the time I used it as an excuse to be a dickhead, basically. I remember going around town and started pulling down fucking Specsavers billboards, and I remember the police pulled up at one point and said, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I said, "Well, this is basically corporate sanctioned graffiti." And in my mind it was just completely justified, like I'm causing discord to society. In retrospect, looking back, it's like you're a bit of a prat really, but it was all part of development, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's everyone in every generation finds the thing that justifies their youthful impulses.
Yeah.
And kind of the has at least the sense to rationalize. Urinating on this garden gnome is a deeply political act. The garden gnome represents the bourgeoisie, and my urine is the power of the working class proletariat. I think everyone.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant! So we'll come into time. Oh well, first of all, I just want to congratulate you on, because you practically finished a book now, haven't you? Is it coming out in April?
Yeah. So it's basically the process from here, touching wood, is that I get back a physical copy that is not completely wrong in every way.
Right.
And that tells me enough to tell me that it's ready to go, and then basically hit the big red button on my desk, and it becomes available, and that's really it. That's the process as it is.
Fantastic.
That's it. Look, I guess since I've got a voice being recorded here, something that I should say, and I do desperately want to say, is just this ridiculous number of people have helped me, and I know that there's nothing more boring than reading a list of a million names, and I won't do that. I'm not putting that exactly in my book, but
the space is yours. If you need to, go for it.
Well, I mean, I think I won't go wholly into it either, because I think also I'll forget people. But the thing is, that there's been so many people have helped me. In particular, people like Adam Go Rightly, and the illustration from Alex Screen, and everybody who's done interviews with me and read through and all sorts of things. It's a fool's errand to try and name everyone, but I think I do want to say that it would have literally been impossible without a lot of people, who really devoted a lot of time and energy and goodwill towards me. And I think that I just wanted on the record that I'm incredibly grateful for being empowered to do this really dumb book, which I believe in totally and absolutely, but it's a ridiculous thing to spend your time doing, and I was able to do it because of the goodwill of a lot of people, and I am just incredibly grateful that I've had this creative community to rally around me and empower me to do this sort of thing.
I'm sure they hear you loud and clear, and I just want to emphasise that to me the book looks absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to actually read it properly. And it's far from just a dumb book.
Yeah, I mean that's that's me sort of being facetiously self whatever, it's I think I'm in love with my little book. It's been a lot of work, and it's I guess it's there's a lot of things you can do with your time, and deciding to have an act, a 4 or 5 years into a book like this is, I think it is silly in some ways. It is silly, I guess, in this sort of absurdist sense. It is, I think, in some ways a ridiculous thing to do with your time, but there's a lot of beauty and value in the ridiculous. So I don't really feel like I'm being particularly self-critical at all by saying that. I'm
there's nothing,
very happy to have been able to do what I've done here.
We're not invalidating the ridiculousness on this show.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, absurdity is essential.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it's been great talking to you. So the book comes out in April.
Probably within 14 days I'll get a book in the mail, and either you will get a very cheerful announcement from me that says it's here, get a copy, and I'm hoping about a month after that there'll be an ebook available as well.
Fantastic.
Or you'll get a very sad little update from me that says it's here, it's a mess, watch this space. So hopefully it's the first.
So is there anywhere people can go, like a website, or do you want to put your Twitter handle up? I can do that in the description below, or anything like that would help people sort of get access. Yeah,
absolutely. ChasingEris.com is the website, and at ChasingEris is the Twitter. And there'll be a page up on. I'm going through Lulu at the moment, and then hopefully to expand that a bit later. But I'm quite happy just to have a single point as a starting point.
Brilliant.
But that'll be available. I'll be promoting the heck out of that through those places, and also Chasing Eris on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/ChasingEris if you'd like to follow that and pass all of your information onto Cambridge Analytica and all the rest of it.
I'll definitely put that link in the description below.
Easy as. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Okay, it's been lovely chatting, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Yeah,
Cheers,
you
Leo.
too. Take care. Bye.